everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Tired Pod. This week, we are tackling a debate that has been on the minds of the entire F1 community, which is what happens to that open Lewis Hamilton seat in 2025. Now, we thought we would do it in a debate format because Shez and I, while we are great minds and we usually think alike, we often differ on this. And so what better topic for us to tackle than to debate this? But before we get into it, Shez, how are you doing today?
I am okay. I enjoy the fact that you're calling it Lewis Hamilton's seat, like he's just been keeping it warm for somebody else.
This is just me teeing you up before I rip to shreds your pick for it, man. But here we go. Okay, so there are a lot of machinations, there are a lot of thoughts, there are a lot of opinions. Let's just get this one thing out there. Like, nobody knows what the hell is going on, right? We know there are contracts, there are opt-in, opt-out clauses, there's all kinds of different things. So I'm going to put forth to you a list of the top 5 candidates that I think should be in that seat. I'm not saying that that'll happen. I do think it would be in the best interest of Mercedes to make this happen. But I'm going to suggest to you 5 guys that I think would be not just deserving, but would just be fantastic in that open Mercedes seat in 2025. And dare I say, even bring glory back to Mercedes. Are you ready for it?
5 guys sounds tasty. Let's go.
5 guys. So here we go. Number 5, Esteban Ocon.
Yeah. Okay.
I know you're saying that, but look, he is a de facto Mercedes driver at the moment, right? He has been loaned out to Alpine. I think I was going to say Renault, but Alpine, and and he has also done what I think is a brilliant move, which is kind of insert himself in the Mercedes seat conversation at the time when they launch a new car. Like that couldn't be that's smart and cheeky move. But I think he would be great. He would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Ocon's a good political move. He's obviously positioned himself well. He's managed to get himself a long-term contract at Alpine without doing a lot on the performance side, I don't think. And he's obviously still under contract at Mercedes as well, which is pretty impressive for him. In terms of how that would stack up as a teammate pairing, though. My issue with Ocon is twofold. The first is that just on a pure pace point of view, he was outpaced and outpointed over 2 seasons against Fernando Alonso, and then year 1 against Pierre Gasly, who I like Gasly, but he's not like for me, he's not a world championship winning driver. He's okay, but he's not gonna I don't think he's gonna set the world alight. He lost out in the championship on qualifying and in the races to a year 1 Pierre Gasly at Alpine. That worries me. The second is his penchant for feistiness. Often when he's on the back foot, I find that Ocon gets a little bit touchy-feely, and by that I mean he likes to collide with his teammate. He did it with Perez. He's done it with Alonso. He's done it with Gasly, although that wasn't really his fault. But the point still stands. They were still touching each other, and I think in a team like Mercedes, where George already felt like he was just trying to prove himself over the course of 3 seasons, or 2 seasons. Sorry, they've been together so far. What you don't need is another guy that's just sitting there trying to prove himself, and ultimately will cause more accidents than he needs. That's my worry about Ocon, and I think there are better candidates out there than him.
I definitely agree with you. That's why he's number 5 on the list, right?
Okay.
But what better way than if Mercedes are looking for a band-aid, a transitional driver. Let's go at it, man. Let's just have fun with it. Russell and Ocon going at it with each other like that. That's amazing.
I think I'd look, if you're going to have fun, I'd rather have 2 drivers that are of a decent performance level, not one that's really, really quick and the other one that's not as quick but gets angry and hits the other guy. That's not what I want.
Come on, man. All right. Okay, let's move on and let's see what you think about the next one. Number 4, Alex Albon.
Oh, only at number 4.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay,
I mean,
go on.
it's, again, Alex has done all the right things in the time that he's been at Williams. He's brought them to the forefront, such that they can be. He's proven to drive a car to the front, being top 10 in qualifying in so many different occasions. I mean, he has done everything right. And probably in my mind, the most deserving based on performance, and given the potential ahead. I mean, he did have a rough time being inserted into that second Red Bull seat early on, but we never truly got a chance to see his potential, although he was a couple of podium places away, right? Like, I mean, there was that one with Lewis Hamilton, I believe in Brazil, right? In that last race, first season. And then, I think that would be a great pairing. Albon and Russell probably get along very well. So they could, if this is a Mercedes rebuild project in many ways, which it is, why not bring him in? Why not kind of get him to the 4? So yeah, that's number 4, Albon.
I think it's a good move for Mercedes. I think that'll work out quite nicely for them. I'm not sure it's such a good move for Albon. A couple of reasons for that. The first is that he's got himself into a nice position at Williams where they really want to build around him. Vowles has kind of said that he sees the future of Williams um, revolving around Albon. And I think when he was at Red Bull, that was the one thing he really needed, was somebody to really put his arm around him and kind of tell him that, you're our focus, and you know yeah, we're going to help you through the things that you're getting stuck with. He says that he came out of that season and he was doing sim work in the following season at Red Bull,
Mhm.
and he was the one that was the only point at which he was able to develop things into the car that he had wanted, because up until that point nobody wanted to listen to him because he just wasn't getting the results, and it just turned into a vicious cycle. My worry about him going to Mercedes, I think he'll perform really well. I think it'll be a completely different situation to what it is to what it was at Red Bull. But it means that he then comes out of that nice situation where he's got a team built around him, and he can't go back to that. Like, he wouldn't be able to go back to Williams after a Mercedes stint. And maybe we're going to discuss another driver further up our list, but if Mercedes have got their eyes on somebody else for 2026 onwards, then it means that as soon as he walks into that seat, Albon's time there is numbered. And that's not what Albon wants. Like, as an Albon fan, it's not what I want. I think his potential is greater than that. I think he has the potential to achieve things that his stint at Red Bull didn't really give him a chance to show. And if he's just stuck at Mercedes for a single season, and then gets ousted for the next big thing, that that leaves him in a tricky position. I don't know where he'd go next, other than it's a trip back to Red Bull, at which point he becomes a perennial um, second driver without any hope to do anything more than that.
Okay.
That's my worry about him.
So I hear everything you're saying about a car being built around him, but a car being built around him at Williams is nowhere close to, let's just say, a semi car being built around him. And there's nothing to say that Mercedes, now that they're going to lose a 7-time world champion and Lewis Hamilton, that they're necessarily looking to build a car around one particular driver. So I could see Albon fitting into that role very well. I mean, Russell's made the move from Williams to Mercedes as well. So there's nothing to say that they couldn't have another driver in the mix. And then maybe the focus in the new era that is now Mercedes can be slightly more different than being sort of heavily dependent the Lewis Hamilton route that they've been at. And I'm not convinced that George Russell is an alpha driver as well. So if Albon wants to compete for wins and championships, which he has stated he wants to, right, or at least be in the mix, that seat, whether it's for a couple years or beyond, and who knows, he could make an impact and stay there for a while too. That would be a great jump ahead for him. And again, Mercedes are now effectively hitting the reset button on whatever their projects were, right? That is about to change in many ways. And I think that Albon can be an answer to that question moving forward. I don't know. I don't necessarily believe that Russell is like the
I think
guy they're building
I
around.
think that only works for a season. I think they are, because I think Toto Wolff has been fairly clear that George is the team leader. He's said that
He has
on
to say
record.
that now. He has to say that.
Sure, but he has said it on record, and their actions up until now have been that they're putting their eggs into the George basket. And in terms of The only thing that I think that would change that is if Albon suddenly turns up in 2025 and completely blows George Russell out of the water. I would say that past performance doesn't suggest that that's what's going to happen. If you look at their F2 season together, the
Okay, but
over the course of the season, Albon was excellent, but ultimately George Russell won the F2 title in his rookie season, and Albon came third. So,
okay, fair enough. But if we're doing comparisons, then who had the better stint at Williams?
what do you mean in terms
George
of?
Russell at Williams better than what Albon has done at Williams?
I think they're comparable. I don't think you can say that one was better than the other. One was benefiting from more investment when you had Doralton come in, take over the team, and actually put some money into it with a team principal that is actually pushing the car in a particular direction, or pushing the team in a particular direction, versus the other one that had to deal with literally the slowest car on the grid and was still putting it into positions that shouldn't have been on a Saturday. So I'd say that they were comparable, and perhaps on pace, Russell had it. And you can't even really compare teammates because it's not like Albon's taken out a up and coming future world champion in that Williams. He's taken on and beaten Logan Sargent versus Russell beating Latifi. These aren't drivers that are going to light the world on fire. As much as I know you're going to say that you love Nicholas Latifi, he's not that guy, man. So I
But that's
don't
what I'm
know.
saying. It's a wash. Latifi, Logan Sargent, it's a wash. It's a wash, right? I mean, it's not like we're, but and again, I'm not suggesting again. I think you're very convinced that Russell is the guy at Mercedes, and I recognize that is what you have to do in this moment because having a seven-time world champion walk out, right, or leave, whatever you want to call it, right? Mercedes has got to go back now and instill a lot of confidence in its own abilities and its partners and everything. So they do have to send that message. They cannot come out here and say, "Oh yeah, okay, well, we're going to look for someone even better," kind of thing. You can't really do that. So I agree that that's what they've said. But my point is, everything is fluid. Like you could put
Yeah,
Albon
I mean,
in the
I think they
car.
can. I think they can. But I think you're going to argue yourself out of a point in a minute because if you're looking for somebody better, you don't put Albon in the car next to Russell,
I didn't say
right?
that they're looking for.
Albon's but that's the only reason that move makes sense for Alex, right? And that's what I'm thinking about here. I'm not thinking about Mercedes. I'm thinking about Alex. I think as a teammate pairing, they'll be great for 2025. They'll be just fine. But Alex will be out of there by 2026. And then that puts him in a position that I don't think he should find himself in.
All right. Okay, fair enough. I agree with you. I think it makes sense for Alex, maybe not so much for Mercedes. But then speaking of better,
I think the other way around. I think it makes sense for Mercedes, not so much for Alex.
all right, it makes sense for only one of them. How about that?
Indeed.
All right, let's move on to driver number three. And speaking of better performer, my driver number three would be Carlos Sainz.
Hmm.
I mean, enough said, right? Based on what we just talked about, Carlos will be sliding in from a seat at Ferrari. He has lost to arguably the greatest of all time, right? There's no reason why they couldn't have him. He's steady. He performs well. He recognizes the car, the performance. He recognizes everything. He knows how to manage a race. Not the quickest guy, right? Absolutely. Maybe not sheer out and out pace. He wouldn't be there. And I don't know who would win in that sort of competition between him and Russell in terms of just being outwardly fast. But I think again, and with my presumption that Mercedes is in a more of a rebuilding phase, even a 2-year stint with Carlos Sainz would put them in probably a better place than where they're at today.
Yeah, I like Sainz. I like Sainz as a driver there. I think that would be great fun. And I think if anybody's going to potentially keep George on his toes, it'll be Sainz. Sainz is I really like him. Like I really really like Carlos Sainz. I agree with you. I don't think he's got the ultimate pace over a lap or even over a race stint, but he learns, right? I think his 3 seasons at Ferrari and even before that when he was up against sort of Lando at McLaren show that he's a driver that may not start off a season absolutely on it, right? He won't have the ultimate pace of the driver in the other car, but he has the potential to change his approach and see what the other guy is doing, look at the data in an analytical and objective way, and bring that to his driving. This is something that Daniel Ricciardo tried to do over 2 seasons at McLaren. He found that he wasn't able to drive the car in the same way as Lando, looked at the data and tried to do it and couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos looks at the data, goes, "This is what I need to do," and then just does it.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that over 21, 22, and 23, Carlos starts at this level and gradually drags his own pace up to the level of what Charles Leclerc can do. And in 2023, actually flipped that in the middle of the season, perhaps with the caveat that the car moved slightly in a different direction. So that bodes well. So I think that'll be a really, like, in terms of his performance against Georgia, it will be really good. And actually in terms of his smarts and race savvy in the car, George, I think, thinks he's a very smart driver and likes to call things from the cockpit. I think back to his comments in Japan where he tried to use Lewis as the DRS buffer behind him. But it was Carlos that came up with that idea the race before and had pulled it off with aplomb. Yeah, because he's a guy that really is thinking in the car, and he's not just thinking about, how can I get ahead in this particular situation? He's thinking, how can I get ahead by the end of the race? That's what race savviness is about. It's not about being short-sighted. So I think Carlos would be an excellent shoe-in in that. And I don't think the performance deficit against George, certainly, because I think George is really quick, but I don't think he's Charles Leclerc quick. And he doesn't quite have the race savvy that he thinks he does. And I think Carlos would come into that team and mess with his head, come in there with some good performance and smarts, and potentially, if not dominate the team, certainly rock the boat enough that it makes it interesting and gives Mercedes a tougher choice for 2026 onwards, I think. So that'll be, yeah, I like Carlos Sainz as a choice in there. I think he'd be great.
And having Carlos at the front of the field will also ignite in him a different level of passion, right? Because he clearly got left out of the musical chairs, if you will. And of course, he lost his seat to Lewis Hamilton, and he probably doesn't have any ill will against them, but he's got to have at some level a little bit of bitterness against Ferrari. And what better way to kind of get him up there? So everything that you said, right? The gradual growth could be accelerated. Again, Mercedes is in a bit of a rebounding phase. He too is in there, and an intelligent driver and intelligent manufacturer. He probably wouldn't. I mean, come on, if you've been in a Ferrari seat managing strategy from within the cockpit, it's Mercedes is a big upgrade in many different ways. So
yeah, that's one we can argue another.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, we've
time,
seen. Yeah. So anyway, we have.
But yeah, but I mean, I do. Yeah, I do agree with you though that Carlos is always the guy that's left without a seat when the musical chairs, when the music stops, right? But and it's the same. It was the same in that McLaren, Renault, Red Bull triumvirate that happened a few seasons ago. It's the same thing that's happened now, and I always feel so bad for him because it's never his fault. It's never because of something that he has done. So
why settle for an Audi drive just yet? Like that wouldn't get him in the championship mix.
I still think that's where he's going to end up in 2026, though, because I think all things being considered, I still think Mercedes are not going to want to give up their investment on George Russell. Is my feeling.
But still, why not bring Carlos in, right? Like why even if it's a couple of years, and if I'm Sainz, at least I have a shot at being competitive and winning and competing for podiums and wins possibly a couple of years, than to sort of go backward and then you really don't know where your career goes really at that point, and you just have to wait for something on.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess all you can do is just keep performing at the level that you're performing and hope that somebody ultimately recognizes that. Although, yeah, I don't know when that's going to happen.
All right, you ready to move on?
This is number 2.
All right, yeah, it is. Driver number 2 that should be in that Mercedes seat, Sebastian Vettel. Now, I know you're slightly stunned there, or maybe not, but that again, 2 years, former world champion, German driver. an ambassador for the sport. If you're going to replace Lewis Hamilton, then, why not? Why not? I mean, Sebastian kind of left, at the time that he was ready, but might have felt, through some parts of last year, like he kind of missed out. And I know he's not that kind of driver, but if you're going to lure him out of retirement and bring that level of excitement, enthusiasm, energy, and then all of the above, the accolades, the credentials, they all kind of speak for itself, right? What better direction to go than to do that? And Seb's not going to do it for more than a couple of seasons. Why not? Why not do it?
No, I think the excitement in F1 for it is probably more than his own excitement at being linked to a return. Because okay, can we just talk about recent Formula One returnees? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and how successful they are. So there's three. Yes, Kimi, Fernando, and who's the other one?
Who came back from
Schumacher.
retirement?
Schumacher was the other one.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's just talk about those three returnees. Yeah. Okay. Let's just wait for it. Yeah. Okay. Just wait for me to finish my point. You understand what I mean here? Yeah. So Kimi left when he wasn't doing so great, right? Went off for 2 seasons, and he was paid to leave that Ferrari seat to make way for Fernando Alonso. Went off and crashed his rally car quite a bit for a couple of seasons, and then came back.
Wow.
Came back. Yeah, nice, very nice. And then came back to Lotus, and he did all right for the first couple of seasons. But what then happened to his career? It just petered out into an almost nothing career where he was playing second fiddle to Sebastian Vettel for 4 seasons at Ferrari. That's not the Kimi Räikkönen I remember. That's definitely not what I remember. Fernando and Michael, I think, are two completely separate entities, though, right? They both left on an absolute high. Schumacher finished second in the championship in 2006, and arguably, but for a puncture in Brazil and an engine blowout in Japan in 2006, could have won that title. He was still absolutely at the top of his game when he left. He shouldn't really have left, but he came back 4 seasons later, and I think he had a hunger in him because he'd sort of lost that for the past 4 seasons. He hadn't had that thrill and that challenge, which is why he was out there riding motorcycles and breaking his neck. But he left F1 with unfinished business on a high. Fernando Alonso, again, when he left in 2018, left performing at an unbelievable level. Right, he left McLaren because McLaren were not performing, not because he wasn't performing, and there wasn't an open seat for him, which is an absolute travesty. How is there not a seat for Fernando Alonso? But anyway, that's why he went off, and he needed to keep it going, which is why he then went and won WEC twice. Competed in the Indy 500 again. And then came back and has been a force to be reckoned with since he's been back, because Fernando never really lost it. Sebastian falls more into the Kimi mold here. He could have retired at the end of 2021, and I think that would have been reasonable. He extended his career for a bit because I guess he and everyone else thought that he might be able to reignite the magic with another project. But it never really happened because he just isn't. Either he never was, or he wasn't the same driver as he was when he was winning all those championships at Red Bull. And I don't know if the Ferrari time and the drubbing that he took to Leclerc over the last 2 seasons was enough to kind of take the fire out of him. And I think if he came back, that's the Seb you'd get. So so it sounds like a good idea on paper, but I think in practice you'd get a guy that doesn't really, in his heart of hearts, want to be there.
So I agree with everything that you're saying, right? I think you're posing a very reasonable thing. You're looking back at history, right? But I'm more in the mindset of romanticizing the idea of a former world champion coming back with a team. Aston Martin and Mercedes, that's not in the same zip code. You can't compare the two. Again, you're walking into Mercedes, that's a different deal altogether. So yes, I have no way to know what his motivation is. Clearly, there's enough there for us to know that there's an interest, but I do agree with you. The bridge between interest and actually making it happen is a completely different thing. I could fully see Sebastian in a very ambassadorial role, maybe even the president of Formula One at some point, making smarter decisions about everything from being environmentally sustainable to let's not forget adding the 11th team that they should have added this year. But I do agree with you. I would again in the context of this being a short-term project, and we have seen this time and time again. You're talking about the outcome, but I'm looking at it more from the perspective of when an athlete that has been performing at the highest level that they've been performing for all their life, this is the one thing they've known, that itch to come back is always there. And so
Does he have
sometimes
that itch? Does he have that itch, Omar? Is there any evidence to suggest that he has that
a
itch?
little bit, right? He's done a bit of driving here and there. He's shown up at tracks. He's
Yeah,
even he's
that's the
even
odd
not
lap. Yeah,
right, but he's not particularly closed the door on that, right? In that interview with
he's
Martin Brundle, he said,
he
okay,
seems
yeah.
yeah, sure, but he seems happier to keep bees at the moment than he does to
No, that's
drive.
fair. And I'm not saying he would again, I'm not suggesting he'd come back on a 5-year stint, right? Again, the stars have to align. There has to be a very specific situation for someone to kind of consider that. And all I'm saying
This
is
is the
that
situation, but
this is
I just
like
don't think he fits.
it's a 1 or max 2 year project at the most, right? I mean, if we're talking about just 2025, right? And then the regulations change if Mercedes is approaching it that way again. I'm not again a guy can only dream, right? Like, so that's kind of where we're at, right, with this.
A weird dream.
But this
It's a
it would
it's
be
a
a
weird
fantastic
dream.
pairing. It is a weird dream. But hey, it's the off season.
I,
Come on, man.
I don't think it would be bad. I think you're romanticizing something that isn't real. I don't think that
All
that
right,
pairing
all right, fair
would
enough.
reach the heights that you're saying, and for that reason, I'm out.
All right, you're out. So if you're out on that, then Lord knows what happens with this next one. So my number one pick for the open Mercedes seat
It's
is
Valtteri Bottas. I knew you were going to say it.
no, it isn't. It is Max Verstappen.
No, okay. Okay.
Okay, hear me out. I know it sounds crazy. I know, and then you kind of taking that pause and like, are you questioning your choices about doing this podcast with me? Okay, hear me out. All right.
I am listening.
Why would Mercedes do this? Well, what better way to do to replace Lewis Hamilton than to bring Max in? Like that is just amazing. It is the most amazing thing that can happen. That's the shot in the armor that they need. That's when they know, okay, yeah, we're reset, we're reloading. Yeah, George Russell is there, but come on, Max coming there, that would change the game entirely, right?
Sure.
Why would Max do this? I know you're saying, hey, we've talked about Adrian Newey.
I do want to hear this actually. I mean, I want to put you. I want to try and put you in Max's apartment while he's sitting on the sim, and then suddenly they do a Zoom call, and Toto and James Allison are sitting there. They're going to pitch the Mercedes seat for 2025 to Max Verstappen. I want to hear your pitch.
If I'm saying that, all I'm saying is Lewis Hamilton left. You want to get back in that seat and beat the guy who was there. Like, what better way to do it? Yes, Max has had. I know. Look at me. I know. You're. Hear me out. Hear me out. Why would Max do this? Right? It's a very simple thing. Things run its course, right? Max has had a dominant run. He's most likely going to win this year as well, right? You're always looking for a little bit of a newer challenge, a slight change of scenery, much like what we talked about with Lewis, right? It's not that you're not motivated. I mean, we know Max is motivated beyond anything can do in their life that would be so motivated. Like he's already crossed all those thresholds, right? But hey, if you're really in this Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen rivalry, what better way than to go right before the regs change and go and dominate in Mercedes? That would just be amazing. That would be a feather in the cap. Then we're having a different conversation about GOAT, by the way. Like that changes completely. 4-time champion, 4 in a row, going there in 25, resurrecting a Mercedes team. That is just amazing. By the way, we're not going to speculate about all the Christian Horner stuff, but there is a broad sort of reality to this, right? Winning brings trouble, winning brings drama, and regardless of how things work out, this is potentially going to be very, very bad for Red Bull. Like there are signs there that there is, a somewhat of a collapse coming down. We could have kind of seen this coming with the passing of Dietrich Mateschitz a couple years ago. Was it a couple years ago? Yeah, 22, right? But you can kind of see this is how dynasties end, right? Dynasties end badly because if they were never going to end, then they would continue to be a dynasty. There's no nice, easy way of dynasties ending. And I think it's fair to assume that the next couple years are going to bring a lot of turmoil for a team that has dominated for a while. There's general complacency, there's just all these kind of things. And then you add in what's happening at the moment, and we don't know what's actually going to happen. But clearly, there's going to be a bit of a fallout from it, and that is going to impact Red Bull. And if you're Max, what better time than to get out and get into another seat somewhere else where things are aligned much better than whatever the aftermath of all of this. So
yeah, I think it's based on a lot of assumptions. And I think if I was Max listening to that, and I think that Adrian Newey is still going to be hanging out at Red, and I think that Adrian Newey is still hanging out at Red Bull even if Christian Horner's left. I think my answer is going to be no thanks. Like, yes, I take all of your points about romance and I'm going to take over Lewis Hamilton's seat and show them that I'm definitely better and I can take on George Russell. I don't think he's going to want that. I think he's going to say, I'm in the fastest car in Red Bull in Formula One right now. I've been dominating in it. I know how to use it. I know how my team runs.
Yeah, but
even if there's a change at the top, I'm still going to be able to do that in this car. I'm happy to stick it out here. The only reason that equation changes is if somehow Red Bull powertrains have dropped the ball so much, and Max somehow knows this and goes, "I need a way out." But right now, I can't see that is the route that he's going to take.
We're not talking about it right now. We're not talking about it right. And I completely agree with you. If things stay as they are,
everything that you're saying is so speculative, right? And we've been speculating about this for 2 weeks now. There is zero information that has come out of this investigation and out of the periphery of this investigation that is proven. So it's purely speculation. And
fully agree.
And at times, I think it's slightly inappropriate speculation because
Absolutely.
we really don't know what it was that was done, what the accuser has had to go through, and what they're going through right now. But to speculate on what's going to happen to Horner over the next few weeks or so, I think it's way too speculative, way too early, and I think that side of things I can't bring into an argument about why I think somebody would leave.
But I'm not necessarily bringing in what the details of anything. I completely agree with you. Like I have seen a lot of stuff, and frankly, it's been borderline unacceptable really in the way, because we all think about what can happen with Christian Horner. Well, there's another affected party on the other side, and we don't know what impact they've had, and we should clearly not. So I'm in no way saying that. I have been arguing for quite a few weeks that
you have
all champions, all dynasties come to an end. And if you're looking for signs of what that might look like, these are the signs. I'm not saying Horner is guilty or innocent. I'm saying that regardless of the outcome, right? Whatever the outcome is, there will be a fallout. And when you add that fallout, right, there's going to be bad feelings at minimum, right? Like no one comes out of this winning. Like there's no situation, there's no outcome in this that you can say, wow, okay, yeah, no, everything's fine, let's just go back. It's not going to be the case. There are people who wouldn't directly be involved in this that would want to have nothing to do with this. Their motivation will not probably be that. They might go and go elsewhere. Red Bull's lost a lot of staff. I mean, there are things that are happening along the way. Then you add the regulation change. I absolutely agree with you that Adrian Newey would nail it. But even that by itself may not be enough. You just brought up the powertrain stuff. Again, that is in some ways, the success of that is linked to Horner being there. And again, I'm not going to speculate about what that is, but there would be an impact, right? So again, if I'm Max, I'm not making that decision today. Absolutely not. But I am taking phone calls from Toto Wolff and saying, yes, let's keep talking. Let's see what 6 months look like. Forget wanting to look at 2020, 26 and beyond, right? Let's see what these first few races look like. Mercedes doesn't seem to be in a hurry to make a decision. Yeah, why not? if there is a right now 3-time, 4-time in the making champion waiting in the wings, then why wouldn't you wait?
Okay, I'm going to give you my two
All right,
picks here,
let's go for
because
it.
because
I have worn you out now.
I mean, I can't believe that these two haven't come up so far. So my number two
All right.
is Fernando. Like you want to have Sebastian Vettel come back, a tired, grumpy, not really wanting to be there, Sebastian Vettel, versus an end of contract, fired up, as always, ready for another challenge. Fernando Alonso, who's quick, he's smart, he'll shake things up. You know, if they're going to drag more performance out of each other, Fernando's the guy that's going to do that. You know, he's the guy that's going to rile George up and get him to reach another level if he has it. So I think Fernando's the guy, and I think Fernando has a reasonable chance if Mercedes are competitive of one outperforming George Russell and then drop Mike and leaving. And second, if that's the case, if Mercedes are competitive enough to actually bring a credible championship challenge, I think that would be. And I'm not saying that George wouldn't be able to do that, but I think that Fernando would equally be able to do that, and I think it would be much more fun to watch when it does happen. I think Fernando would just be an incredible nuclear weapon to just drop into that mix. It would just be brilliant.
So as the resident, I want drama guy on this pod, I couldn't think of a better pick than Fernando Alonso, right? But the reason I kept him out of my top 5, he would be number 6 outside looking in, right? But the reason I didn't bring is that is just too much for Mercedes to have. It just is. And I agree with you. There's no debating the fact that that would be the spiciest lineup that you could put up there. And there's no debating the potential of what Alonso brings. We know that. But Alonso also rubs people the wrong way. And he's potentially a catalyst for a lot of drama that teams within may not want, right? So I'm just looking at it from the perspective of like, okay, if I can bring in a Sainz or if I can bring in an
But you're
Albon.
happy to have Max Verstappen in the car.
But Max is not drama, man. Max is not drama.
Max is not drama.
Max is not drama.
Him
Max
and George
is not in the same way that Alonso is.
Him and George
Not in
have
the
crashed
same.
into each other twice last season.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I totally agree. But listen, you're bringing a guy that is, hey, we have to get to this at some point. Like Max is now in the GOAT conversation. He's not GOAT yet, but he is definitely.
But so is Fernando.
Yeah, but Fernando, okay, not in the same way as a Lewis Hamilton or Schumacher, right? That's
yeah, sure.
We can talk about GOAT tiers another day.
Fernando's right up there in terms of like the level of consistency he's shown over
that's the drama
years and years and years.
But that's the drama he wants. That's the drama he wants coming with it. Like, what is the payoff for the drama versus winning, right? I mean, come on. Like, if you put
Max, you'd have the same
drama, but you're competing.
I think you'd have. I think you'd have. Well, I think you would be if Fernando was
there. Not in the same way, though.
You're telling me that Fernando wouldn't be competing.
Isn't there a delta between Max and Fernando? Are you saying that they're the same two drivers? No,
I'm not. But that's not to say that Fernando isn't going to win races if the car is able to do it. And over the course of a season, I'm also not saying that he wouldn't be able to win a title out of that car.
They're not going to win a championship with them. Come on. Yes, they can win races, but if the goal is, okay. I mean, look, what says you're going after a championship more, Alonso or Max? I agree with you. I agree, but there's no competing. The only guys you could put in front of Max are Michael Schumacher, which cannot happen, and Lewis Hamilton, right? These are now we're talking about GOAT level GOAT. Like these are like the Mount Rushmore, as we like to call it here. Like Alonso doesn't make it to that. It doesn't. Not in the same way that Lewis makes it.
Yeah, I think the convincing is going to be much easier for Fernando than it is for Max.
He's calling him. He's texting to him.
Yeah, in terms of who's actually has a chance of getting in that seat, it's more likely to be Fernando than it is Max. Max is not going to go to that seat if it's a choice between a dominant Red Bull and a potentially up-and-coming Mercedes. Up-and-coming after 8 seasons of dominance. I just don't see it.
I like to think of it as rebuilding, revamping, refocusing, re-enhancing, whatever. I completely agree. Whatever. But I could see Fernando happening. I'll give you that.
And I don't think Max wants to give himself the grief of having to go up against trying to prove himself George Russell. I just don't see him wanting to do that. But he can avoid the trouble. Okay, last one.
Hit me with your number one. Number one. Come on, let's go.
Okay, my top one is the one that everyone's had on their lips but no one's ever really heard of. Kimi Antonelli.
Oh yeah.
The reason for that is, look, you've already got George Russell in there as your stable long-term prospect, right? And you've been building up Kimi to that point. Now, if Kimi wins the F2 title, that would cap off a run from 2022 to the end of 2024 if he wins that title of winning everything. He won two two F two national F4 titles in Italy and Germany in 2022, and two Formula regional categories in Europe and the Middle East in 2023. Right, that's four titles in 2 seasons. That's better than anybody else has done in the last couple of seasons. The only person that I think that can match that is Oscar Piastri, who won 3 titles in 3 seasons.
Mhm.
So I think in terms of potential coming in, and this is always my barometer of how good a driver is, if they can turn up and dominate a championship straight away, and especially if they can come in and win F2 as a rookie. If he wins F2 as a rookie, I think there's no question he needs to be in that Mercedes seat. But even if he doesn't, even if he comes a super close second to an Ollie Behrman or a Victor Martins this season, I think he's done enough and shown enough to show that he wouldn't embarrass himself in that seat. And actually having a year to bed himself in 2025 before they go into a new rule set would be the perfect training for him, rather than sticking him in another car like a Williams that has completely different characteristics. Trying to prove himself in that seat, just put him in the big seat. That's what I say. That's exciting. It's showing faith in your own driver development program, and it's showing faith in the youngster that has shown himself to be performing at the top level. And if you go back to other drivers that have come into big teams at a young age, the three that come to mind are Lewis Hamilton in 2007, turns up against a two-time world champion, reigning, and is not just not embarrassed, he almost wins the championship. In fact, odds on should have won the championship in the last 2 seasons, in the last 2 races. Sure, but it was hardly an embarrassment, was it? Going into into a championship winning car. Second is Max Verstappen. So Max obviously turned up in a Toro Rosso to start with for a season and a half, and then turned up in a Red Bull. And although he made mistakes and did have some learning to do, he won on his debut in the Red Bull. And I would argue that Mercedes will find themselves in a similar situation in 2025 to what Red Bull found themselves in 2016. They're a team that are up and coming. They're knocking at the door of being championship winning again, but they're probably not going to be winning. They're probably not going to be the dominant force in 2025 versus Red Bull, whereas in 2026 they might be. And 2025 is therefore a good season for Max to come in and not for Max, for Kimi to come in and make his mistakes, ready to be right on it come the new rule set. And my third is Oscar Piastri. So Piastri comes into a McLaren team that, although they're not championship winning, have aspirations to be. They're not a Williams or a Haas who are happy to take on, at this time anyway, to take on a driver and developing them for somebody else. They are building for themselves, right? And you can argue that Williams are doing that now, whereas they weren't when they took on George Russell. So to take on so for McLaren to take on Oscar Piastri as a rookie shows some level of faith as well. And he's repaid that. He's been brilliant in that McLaren. Sure, he's not been Lando in the races, but that's what you'd expect Kimi to be as well. You'd expect that with 2 seasons in a Mercedes, George would know the ins and outs of that and would be able to have the edge over him. But Kimi shouldn't be embarrassed in the same way that Oscar wasn't embarrassed at McLaren against Lando. So I think there's a lot of upside in that. You're future-proofing that seat. You're promoting talent, and the talent that you've got, especially if he wins an F2, is something that you don't want to lose. And that's the risk they take in putting him somewhere else or not bringing him into Formula One in 2025, is that he gets poached like Verstappen was by somebody else. So for me, Kimi wins it.
So, as a lifelong Kimi fan, this is a hard one to argue, right? Just by the virtue of the fact that
you know it's not the same
I
Kimi.
know, it's not. Come on, I get it. I was born at night, but not last night. Come on. I get it. I get it. There is, I absolutely, I did. The only reason I left Kimi out of my list is, I just don't know, right? I think the unknown of how he does in F2 this year, which, by the way, side note, I mean, the F2 might have a little bit more eyeballs on it, right, this season, because if we're kind of constantly waiting to see what Mercedes is going to do, that might in a way end up being a great thing for F2 as well. So I couldn't disagree with you on any of the things. I think you said it right. It's a great way for Mercedes to look forward to their future, and clearly what he has, and if all the promise and the hype is actually what it ends up being. There is no doubt, and that in many ways feels like Kimi's seat, right? If it happens now, if it happens later, it does feel like the guy in waiting, unless of course he gets poached. But yeah, I just don't know. Again, I think you put in a very good argument about putting him in there right away and then seeing how things go, give him a chance to fail. I think there's probably a good argument to be made for something slightly different, which is for him to go into a Williams seat for a couple of years, get his feet wet there. What's the difference between the two? Probably not a whole lot, other than how Mercedes feel they want to tackle those couple of years. Putting him in that seat will probably indicate in some ways a longer sort of, in my mind, a longer time frame to getting back at the top, right? Because it does, again, bringing in Alonso, for example, you could kind of be right in the mix right away. Versus, again, bringing in a new driver, you kind of don't know how things will go, even with all the promise and potential. So,
I mean, almost certainly it will be a bit slow to start with, but
slow,
you'd bank on somebody like that.
Correct. Yeah.
You'd bank on somebody like if he wins the F2 title, and I know I keep saying it's a massive caveat, and I have to stress that this is what I want, not what I expect. Yeah, and like this isn't a prediction. This is just a hope. That if he wins that F2 title, that tells me he's something
Ready.
special, right? And if he is, then it doesn't really matter what you throw at him, he'll find a way. And that ultimately is what this should come down to.
I think so, and I wonder if it also is linked to Toto Wolff's his own plans of how long he wants to be in that role as well. This could be bringing Kimi in might be the boost he might feel like he needs to as a 7-time champion himself. Oh, sorry, 6-time champion himself, right? So there's that too. So yeah, I mean, look, I started. We did great. We covered 8 drivers, which is fantastic. That's probably all the 8 that people are talking about. That's fantastic. I tend to agree with you, right? This is Kimi's seat in the end, right? Whether it happens now or not. But I would love to see a Max be in there. And if Max comes in there, then that changes the game all the way. But I do kind of agree with you. This Kimi Antonelli would make all the sense in the world if Mercedes are taking that long approach of, hey, we want to get there and stay there for a while too. So I don't necessarily disagree with you.
Yes, consensus. This is what we need.
Look at that. All right. And so there you have it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us on yet another one of those debates where we have sorted out Mercedes' future, and hopefully they will listen to us, and maybe I'll get a text from Toto right after that, and he actually will reach out to Shez at some point later this week. But thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Mercedes.
You're welcome, Mercedes. Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Tired Pod. Catch us on YouTube. Check out our podcast. We're doing quite a few different things. We'd love to hear from you. Drop in a comment, a 5-star rating. We'll look forward to coming back to you again in a few days. Take care.